right, you made it to the breakouts. We're going to talk about V13 in this one, and I'm joined with Brad and Emily, and we've got a special treat for you here tonight. We're going to go through a number of different parts of V13, practical information, but also some things that we don't talk about as much. And so I think let's just jump right into it. Emily, let's start off with you.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to be here to talk to you, both of you and everybody watching, right? Some of my favorite features that are coming with V13 in this latest release. So first off, I feel like we have to go back and we have to reference the Veeam Software Appliance, right? Did an early release this year, back in September, and I mean, from then, it has just been multiple downloads within the thousands, if I stand corrected. I mean, and there's a lot of things that we could talk about from the Veeam Software Appliance. I mean, from the new UI, the great dashboards where we could see just the overall infrastructure, what it currently looks like. But why don't we just go ahead and ask Veeam Intelligence to tell us a little bit more about Veeam Software Appliance. So why don't we just go ahead and run this prompt. What's new in the Veeam Software Appliance? So here we are asking Veeam Intelligence, and you can see it's doing its thinking there. But as it's thinking, Brad, do you think you can name off anything before Veeam Intelligence does?
I don't know if I can go faster than Veeam Intelligence, but I think of things like the hardened operating system, a default immutable repository, a new slick web UI. How'd I do?
Yeah, you named it. You called out quite a bit, right? So there's a lot of new features coming, and there's a lot of items that were created with the Veeam Software Appliance, from that hardened just enough operating system to allowing customers to leverage the Veeam Infrastructure Appliance, right? So now we could deploy our proxies, our repositories, or we can also leverage a hardware vendor of our choosing and deploy the hardened appliance onto that as well. So a lot of different new ways that we can deploy Veeam in a secure state, also leveraging integrations with our partners. Rick, from a Veeam Software Appliance perspective, is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Well, I would just like to point out, especially the Veeam Intelligence capability. First of all, that's a generative AI technology. It's powered by Azure OpenAI. And then when you spin that around, it also means it's inherently multilingual. I know, I love, telling the good Veeam story, but I realize not everybody speaks English. So we could have asked that same question in several languages, got that same output. But I think it really just, and we're going to talk a little bit about this later, it takes all the guesswork the Veeam Software Appliance does out of just really getting that resiliency outcome. So the customers and partners that we have spoken to, they are amped. So this is the time.
Absolutely. And that Veeam Intelligence, right, that started off with a lot of those key components being built off through Veeam One, right? So Veeam One, our monitoring and analytics platform that can not just look at the data that's coming from the Veeam backup infrastructure, but also look at the data that's coming from your hypervisor infrastructure, right? The platform and the actual machines that we're protecting ourselves. So with that, we actually ported in a lot of the key components from within Veeam One into the web UI that you see as part of both Veeam Software Appliance as well as Veeam Data Platform version 13. So up on the screen, you can actually see there we can pull in certain data points when it comes to malware analysis. So malware has been a key component that we want to make sure that we're identifying early and often for any customer that might be going through a breach. And now we've just made that so much more easier for customers to be able to see that inside of this dashboard, right? So I could get a high-level overview of what does this current state look like? Do we have any threat detection? Any type of notifications that have gone off? And if so, where do those exist within my environment? Kind of get an overall outlook of what that looks like. Now, Brad, I know you are a big fan of this particular feature.
Well, I am, Emily. I mean, when you really think about this and the value it adds to end users, it helps you figure out a blast radius. For when that incident does happen, it helps you go back and significantly shorten your response time, your recovery times, and reduce your downtime to have a restore point that you can quickly ask Veeam Intelligence to say, hey, go analyze my backups and tell me which restore points are suspicious or not suspicious. And furthermore, automate the ability to use tools like Veeam Threat Hunter and post-processing capabilities to validate that's an actual clean restore point to recover from during your forensic analysis.
Absolutely. And one of the key points you brought up there was the deep malware analysis agent. So that is something that is running in the back end that's going to help us to collect all of these anomalies that are taking place in these activities, but then on top of it, be able to give you some additional actions or outcomes that you can have Veeam run in the back end. So let's say we do find a suspicious restore point that has something from a malware or IOC, so an indicator of compromise on it, and we want to go ahead and do another level of scanning. So pretty much bringing up that backup, scanning it with AV tools of our choosing to ensure that it is clean or free from malware. We could do that with Veeam Intelligence, with that new capability, being able to see that, again, all through the Veeam Data Platform with version 13 and Veeam Software Appliance. Alerts, alarms, everything of that nature, it could be a real burdensome. I know for me personally, when I was a systems engineer that helped customers architect and design their environments, one of the things that they always talked about was, I don't want to get another alert or an email sent to my inbox, right? I'm overwhelmed with the amount of alarms that are currently going through. How do I determine which ones are going to be the most important so that way I'm not losing sight over anything within our infrastructure and that overall observability? So I am really excited that we're actually integrating newer technology coming within the Veeam Data Platform. And with that is this automated AI data resilience report. So with this new data resilience report, we're actually going to highlight a summary of all of those different types of alarms. So I think, Rick, what are we at now? Like about 1,200 plus different alarms?
Well, it really starts from these events and this incredible air coverage that comes from what Veeam sees in the market, right, or in the data protected by Veeam. So this amount of opportunity that we see, we really have to aggregate it up and make it clean and usable. So, I like to say that the juice is worth the squeeze when it comes to all of this data, putting it in the right place, and especially when you think about all the security integrations, this is just a needful exercise.
Absolutely. And so taking all of those rich context full of alarms and alerts and putting those all into a nice summarized report where you as a security analyst or you as a backup admin or IT manager, whatever it may be, you now get all of these alarms inside of a single report emailed to you. But not only do you just get the list of alarms, but you also get some background, some context as to what next should I do with these alarms that have taken place. For example, if I'm seeing short on storage, right, I'm running at 5% left of space on my infrastructure platform. Well, now I can get some additional analysis based off of that to say, okay, this is what you need to do next. If, for example, we're seeing some of those malware detection alarms go off and we're seeing something from finding some suspicious extensions or whatever it may be, right? We could go ahead and we could see what the next steps are going to be to go ahead and alleviate whatever that alarm or that alert is. And so you could see that all within the nice generated report, and again, get those action items directly from it. Because we're doing so much with just not only our internal alarms, we are also working on integrating with more and more of these security partners. So one of the security partners I want to bring up is Microsoft Sentinel. So Microsoft Sentinel, we've been a long-term partner with Microsoft for, well, honestly, since the beginning, and Veeam turned 19 this year, so we've been working with Microsoft for quite some time. But leveraging Microsoft Sentinel for those that are running their security platform and that they're trying to understand what do these alerts possibly look like, know that we now have this available within the Microsoft Marketplace where you can actually download the app and start feeding in any of those events, any of that telemetry from Veeam itself directly into Sentinel, so your security analysts as well as your security team can make decisions based off of what's next. And we didn't just stop there. We also wanted to do an additional integration with ServiceNow. So I think 3 years ago, I stood on the main stage at VeeamON demoing the possibilities of what we were going to do with ServiceNow, not just from a Veeam backup and replication standpoint, but also triggering and funneling events and alarms through Veeam One. Well, we've brought that another step forward in releasing our second version of this, and this app is going to be available through the ServiceNow Marketplace. So not only are you going to still be able to funnel in all those rich alarms and events directly into the ServiceNow platform, but you'll also have a dedicated dashboard that's been fully created from Veeam working with ServiceNow themselves, so that way you would have a dedicated dashboard to see the overall look of what does that look like from your threat perspective. And with that, we're going to go ahead and transition over to Mr. Brad Lynch, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some of your favorite new capabilities within the Veeam Data Platform.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. I love that overview. Such great insights on data intelligence and security integrations in the Veeam Software Appliance. Where I kind of want to take this now is there's so much to Veeam version 13, right? And there's things like the Veeam Software Appliance that's getting a lot of light, and it should. But there's over 100 features in Veeam version 13. I'm not going to go through all 100, don't worry. But I do want to go through a bit of a smorgasbord of things that have me really excited that I want to give some shine to. And the very first piece of this is instant restore to Azure. I could not be more excited for this feature, and I'll tell you why. There are 3 perfect use cases for instant restore to Azure. And to be clear, we've had the ability to restore pretty much any workload, whether it's a VMware, Hyper-V, AHV, AWS, the list goes on, to Azure for many years now. But that's a full recovery, right? So you see a lot of these businesses moving cloud to be part of their DR strategy, which makes all the economic sense in the world, but is that actually going to meet the needs of the business from an RTO perspective, from a downtime perspective? And this gives those companies and those businesses that ability. So you can take a VMware workload, a Hyper-V workload, a cloud workload, a physical workload, and you can instantly recover that to Azure for DR purposes. There's also a couple other great use cases. The first one I think of is the ability to restore native cloud VMs, native Azure workloads, right? This is something that you might not have the ability to do today, or you have to keep retentions in your snapshots for longer, which is very costly. So the ability to do this instant recovery to Azure off Azure VMs can save the business a lot of money. And then the last piece, of course, which might be the most obvious, I won't name names, but in this world where we're seeing migrations take place far more often now, the ability to move these workloads to the cloud, this is a great use case for migrations. And Emily, I don't want to put you on the spot too much here, but I recall that you had an account that was able to use Azure as a recovery site during a ransomware event that they went through. I don't know if you can kind of share with the audience a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for a lot of people, their cloud migration or their cloud journeys were tested through multiple different types of events, whether it's natural disaster, a ransomware event, or even just an overall cloud strategy or technology strategy change. So with one of these organizations, unfortunately, they were on the other side of being hit by ransomware. And unfortunately for them, their DR site ended up being part of what they did as a quarantine or as a containment site for their cybersecurity and their insurance firm. So they wanted to do some additional analysis, some forensics on the data that was possibly taken or touched or manipulated. So for them, they only had an opportunity to recover to Azure because all they had access to were their backups. And luckily for them, their backups were stored in immutable storage running within Microsoft Azure. So with a few quick clicks of a button, they were able to start converting those once on-prem virtual machines into Azure VMs. And within 72 hours, they were able to get some critical systems up and running, and their customers were still able to continue on with business, and they were able to still stay open.
That's great. That's such a great example of how Veeam journeys with you, whether your data is on-prem or in the cloud or moving to the cloud. The other piece I really wanted to shed light on is this ability to scan your native cloud workloads, your native cloud backups for malware, right? So whether we're talking about GCP VMs, AWS EC2s, or Azure VMs, the ability to use Veeam Threat Hunter or bring your own AV and Yara rules to scan these backups, right? There's no reason why the cloud workloads are any different than your on-premise workloads. If you find yourself in a cyber event, you're going to need those same tools and same capabilities to bring the business back online and validate you have a clean restore point. Furthermore, this helps automate a lot of this. So Emily did a great job talking about some of the malware analysis that we have, and this helps automate pieces of this as well. What you're seeing here is the ability to automatically kick off things like Veeam Threat Hunter and Yara rules if Veeam detects something suspicious. The name of the game with any of these technologies that get into the detection and prevention business is to reduce the noise. And this is exactly what it does. This helps reduce the false positives, help confirm if you have something suspicious or not by getting a second opinion. So whether it's Veeam that detects something or maybe your traditional EDR tool that detects something, you're able to kick off this automated playbook that says, hey, get a second opinion here and let me know if Veeam Threat Hunter also detects something suspicious. So in that case, if you have 2 different sources that are saying something's going wrong here, you're really going to want to look into it. And I hate to pick on you again, Emily, but I know you worked with a specific customer who had a really good playbook that was integrated into their Palo Alto XSOAR tools that kind of did a little bit of this. I don't know if you can take a moment to speak about that.
Oh, absolutely. I think that back to your point, right? The name of the game is making sure that you have all parties involved to really determine if a threat is really a threat. And for this particular user, right, they are security analysts. They haven't touched Veeam before. They never actually gone into the console. They don't even know what it looks like. They were just working specifically with the security events that you see available here. And essentially with all those rich events, they were able to funnel those over into ServiceNow. So they're using ServiceNow as kind of this well-defined mesh to catch everything for them there. And then anything that was rated a critical SEV 1 or SEV 0, they were forwarding those over into Palo Alto XSOAR. So they're leveraging the marketplace app that was available with Veeam, so that way they can get better context around those specific security alerts. And then for their incident response playbooks, I mean, she just took it one more step further. Not only was she able to say, hey, if this virtual machine has flagged for malware and we want to go ahead and run an AV detection or check to verify if there is AV even installed on this machine, then let's go ahead and let's do that. Let's run it with this incident response playbook, so that way we can go ahead and we can deploy AV onto that machine and start scanning it automatically. And then if it determines that their AV signatures were to be scanned and they were to validate that something was malicious on there, they would go ahead and create a war room on top of that and start to go ahead and notify all those that needed to be available in order to start going ahead and proactively quarantining this environment and having the right discussions for the next steps to take place. So, I mean, they were able to do all of that with just the security events that Veeam provides without even having to do much as far as architecting or deploying Veeam software itself.
Yeah, I love stories like that. I love stories of hearing about customers who are using the technology that we offer to help them automate and orchestrate pieces of this, because the more that's automated, the more that's orchestrated, you're saving countless hours, if not even days of time in the actual event of something happening. Now, to kind of tie a lot of those pieces together, I wouldn't say this is specific to version 13, but this is kind of taking all those different capabilities and showing what it might look like to have a clean room set up, to do exactly what Emily said in an automated, orchestrated way, right? So backing up your workloads, of course, to a Veeam immutable repository, whether that's a Veeam hardened repository or bring your own immutable storage. Having the easy button to send that offsite copy to Veeam Vault, but of course, once again, you can bring your own immutable storage here. And then having the pieces in place to do exactly what Emily just described, to say, okay, I want to mount this restore point, scan it using Veeam Threat Hunter, do an instant recovery either back to the production hypervisor or using the capabilities that are in version 13, do an instant restore to Azure, regardless of what that source workload was, using Veeam Threat Hunter to validate that. And Rick, I'm gonna turn it over for you for a second. I love if there's anything here in particular that you've seen with the clean room that's really helped customers respond to cyber incidents.
Well, the big thing I want to highlight is this is proven technology, and you talk about instant recovery to Azure and then the threat hunter and these scanning technologies. As the resident historian, just to kind of put this into perspective, things like our conversion technologies, that first came out in 2018 with direct restore to Azure, but instant recovery came out in 2010. And so this incredible matrix of anything to anything and the iteration of these cybersecurity capabilities are really this perfect storm of proven technologies to this current set of conditions. And so my challenge is, when you think about Veeam, it's just so much more in this area of capabilities. And I'll admit, this takes a little bit of understanding. For those of you who are practitioners, I like to say the only way to swim is to learn how to swim is by swimming, right? You can't read it in a book. I really encourage organizations to do some of these types of scenarios to get familiar with the capabilities, with the functionality, because it comes down to trust. And that's what I mean by the root of it. You can't trust your infrastructure unless you know how it works, you know that it's validated, clean. And when you put all this together, this is a very worthwhile investment, in my opinion.
And just to pile on top of that, right? So Rick, you just mentioned that if you are brand new and that you're just trying to learn how to kind of wrap your head around how we can get all these integrations working together, there's a really great website of the Veeam community that has all of these pieces put in place there. So you can learn more about the cybersecurity ecosystem. You can learn more about those different types of events that we're funneling through from a security perspective. And you can also see some of those community members that have written up their incident response playbooks and the other additional items that they've done. And that's all through Veeam Community.
Yeah, and it's free. If you have questions, you will get answers there. So yeah, we talk about that a little bit later in this segment, but that's one area that I personally like to say is the Veeam difference. This is an area that we really outperform in the market. So yeah, I'll come back to that. Thanks for the preview, Emily.
That's so great the way you put it. The only way to learn how to swim is to swim, and there's so much truth to that. I think human nature sometimes can be to learn the hard way, and unfortunately that's how many organizations will learn. They'll learn the hard way, and then they'll find out the tools that they have available to them. But if you can be more proactive and put these plans into place beforehand, you'll be infinitely more happy that you did. Just a couple more things I wanted to highlight before I pass it over to Rick to share some more goodness. And the other piece here is you've heard about recon in different areas and different formats of the breakout sessions and the keynote even, but this is integrating. This is kind of on a journey to reduce consoles, right? We're with you. We want to reduce consoles just as much as our end users do, and this is a step in that right direction. So what this is doing is it's taking recon, which is proactively scanning the Veeam components, and you can use it to scan other servers in your environment to look for suspicious behavior. Is an external IP that doesn't usually remote access into this server, whether it's SSH or RDP, remote accessing it? Is somebody trying to brute force their way into your Veeam server, right? So this is now all built into Veeam 1. It just shows some really pretty dashboards of what that looks like. And you can see here of the alerts that it's bubbling up that you might want to take further investigation into. And you can see this particular one is using that exact example I talked about, where it's seeing lateral movement that's suspicious on your network taking place. And of course, none of this, I always say, don't even enable these things if it's not getting forwarded to the security team and to the SIM tools that you're using. Otherwise, it's just noise in your environment getting created. And then the last piece, and I'm super excited about this one that I wanted to shed light on, and this really is for the Veeam users that have been using Veeam for several years, but this is taking Veeam 1 reports and integrating it into VBR, both in the thick client and the web UI. So this is all in the name of reducing consoles, as I mentioned, similar to the recon example, in that you'll deploy Veeam 1 during your day 1 operations, but all of those day 2 operations to generate reports and schedule reports can all be done just from the Veeam console that you use day in and day out. So with that, I really want to appreciate it, and I want to pass it over to Rick, who's going to share some more goodness of version 13.
Yeah, indeed. And one thing I want to highlight is just that there's a lot of shared technology that goes into both Veeam Data Platform as well as Veeam Data Cloud. And I'm going to walk you through what we're doing specifically in V13, but give a hint to some of the other things across the portfolio. And I want to start with Veeam Backup and Replication. So what we're looking at here is a screenshot of just one of the wizards. And I want to highlight that the user interface has taken a major upgrade for the V13 release. And one of the things I want to highlight is if you're an existing user, this will be familiar. This isn't, completely alienating. And it also is important to note that we're on a journey. Emily and Brad both had some glances of the different user interface enhancements that come with V13, but this is the new Windows UI. So this is a Windows app, but we'll get to the web UI in just a second. But just to highlight new modern elements, and I remember distinctly one, I want to say it was 7 or 8, we did a major UI, maybe it was 7.1 if my memory serves right, major UI update. And we kind of have these every decade or half decade or so in between. And it's reasonable to expect this will be the last major update of the Windows UI to be in favor of some of the enhancements with the web UI. But one of the things I want to highlight specifically about the Veeam Software Appliance is the security and compliance analyzers. Now, I know Emily talked a lot about the security capabilities, but the Veeam Software Appliance, just that hardened, just enough OS with the Veeam software embedded on it, that actually takes an incredible amount of work away from our audience that use the product. So if you're a Veeam admin, you spend a lot of time, setting up your jobs, making sure they're working, and great insights from intelligence and threat detection that we have. But the reality is, looking before V13. That was an infrastructure, and that was a lot of homework, right? And you'd go into the security and compliance analyzer, and unless you had like professional services or one of those services heavy partners of ours to implement it, right? You might have some homework from remote desktop and firewall and these other elements of the environment. I want to highlight that the Veeam Software Appliance, when you go into the security and compliance analyzer, there's a lot more built-in green, right? And this immediately will raise your score in Threat Center. So just an element that I think is really important, and we'll talk a little bit about this for those of you who are on the Windows version. And it's like, well, do I move? How do I move? We'll get to that. Don't go too far. But the thought here is this really helps secure your infrastructure, and it's honestly, it's an investment because over time you're going to save time, your own time, when it comes to maintaining this infrastructure. So wouldn't that be nice if you had that many security and compliance analyzer green clicks right from the start? But how do we get there? Now, Emily mentioned, and we talked about it in a couple other parts throughout this event, the just enough OS, right? It's not Veeam on Linux. Yes, Linux is there, but you need a lot less Linux than you think to consume Veeam in the Veeam Software Appliance or in the Veeam Infrastructure Appliance. Now, you might see those two terms floating around, but here's a view of the Veeam Software Appliance, the management interface. So the Veeam Software Appliance would be where Veeam Backup and Replication, Veeam Enterprise Manager are running. A Veeam Infrastructure Appliance would be something like a proxy, repository, mount server, etc. Now, all of that being said, this host management console interface is a really simple mechanism where you can have updates done automatically. Yes, that's saving you time, by the way. And it also allows you to set the security officer role and some of those other kind of admin constructs that make a big deal in your environment. Now, what I want to highlight about this is that that works in conjunction with the web UI. Now, you can see underneath the look of the web UI here that you can click right there and you can download the Windows app. And I think it's also reasonable to expect that for a generation or so, you're going to see the web user interface and the Windows user interface in use for Veeam Backup and Replication. But let's take a look here. Now, as Emily and some of the other parts of the session here today, we talked about the web UI, but if you have already or you will soon watch the Entra ID and Microsoft 365 session, you might see that this is actually starting to look a little bit familiar. Now, I like to say that there's a lot of shared technology across the different web user interfaces. And if you were looking at Veeam Data Cloud or Veeam Backup and Replication, it might look a little bit consistent to what we're seeing here with Veeam Backup and Replication. And I'll start with you, Brad, just kind of a quick take. I feel like all the information that you really need is right there.
Yeah, 100% is. Just right from here, you get a dashboard view. And if you think of before version 13, without Veeam 1 or without going to Veeam 1, you didn't get this information, or at least not as easily. So this gives you the information you need as soon as you log in, whether Veeam 1 is deployed or not yet.
Indeed, and it's super simple. That's what I really like. It just puts it all right there at your first entry point into Veeam. And then the other thing I want to highlight is just looking at the jobs, just a quick look. This is going to be, again, familiar, but it also is delivered here in the web UI as well. So I think that those of you who are like, do I start with the web UI? Do I also use the Windows user interface? Really, for 13, you will probably need both. Officially, the web UI is optional, but some of those kind of really at your fingertips type of information would only come in the web UI. All right, now, Emily, you mentioned it, the Community Hub. I love that you brought that up ahead of schedule, which was near and dear to my heart. But, we have a lot going on there. And why don't you introduce the Veeam community before I kind of give a really good takeaway asset?
No, absolutely. I feel like any chance we get, we have to plug the Veeam community, right? So thousands upon thousands of users go every single day and they check out to see what's new, right? They go and they see, is there anything interesting that we should be looking at? Do I have questions on a particular deployment or a design idea, or maybe just something that I want to test out into the waters. Those security blueprints that we talked about earlier, right? Those can all be found on that Veeam community. And then on top of that, we have all these thematic user groups. So if there's something in particular that you want to follow, if you are deep into cybersecurity, if you want to talk more about how do I figure out what my disaster recovery and orchestration looks like, we have those themed communities that are dedicated specifically to those subjects. So just know that you'll be able to find any information, especially if it revolves around Veeam, through the community, and there's always going to be somewhere there to help and answer any questions you may have.
That's right. And one of the things that we've put a lot of work on is the Upgrade Center. Now, this is something that I think will help you start the discussion of, do I upgrade from Windows 12.x to 13, or do I migrate? And as we go through this journey, there will be a way to migrate over time, but stay tuned, but this would be the place to go to for that information. Now, at the Community Hub, we have the Upgrade Center. It's pinned at the top. You truly cannot miss it. But what I want to highlight is walking through a quick look at how to use this information. So let's take a look at it in action. So if you're looking at the Upgrade Center, first of all, I love that I've made it kind of consistent for a couple of years. We put right at the top the last updated date and per section, which is actually really important because different sections will take updates at different times. Everything from critical information, Brad mentioned hundreds of new features, those are linked up at the top, but right here, this is one of my favorites. It's the differences, different characteristics between the Veeam Software Appliance and Veeam Backup and Replication on Windows. There's some licensing things, there's some capabilities that only exist on one edition, etc. But this is really putting it in a nice consumable format across all the different interests in play. Probably the most important part are the deprecated features. Now is the time to get rid of things like reversed incremental backups, right? That's something that if you've been with Veeam for a long time, you may have implemented that. There's that and a whole bunch of other stuff that have been deprecated. Now's the time to kind of not take that technical debt forward, right? So now's the time to get in front of that. Go to community.veeam.com where you can see it. Well, hey, there's so much to V13. Brad, kind of any closing thought on it?
I think the main takeaway for me is there's over 100 features like we mentioned. There's more than just the Veeam Software Appliance. Of course, focus on that, upgrade, migrate to that if you can't, but dig into what else is out there that's really going to help your organization improve from a data resiliency perspective.
Emily, any final thoughts?
I mentioned Orchestrator, so I feel like I have to make sure that we continue to talk about it, right? So Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, part of the Veeam Data Platform, also came with an update with this release, right? So not only is it going to support the Veeam Software Appliance, so if you're choosing to deploy your Veeam infrastructure on that hardened infrastructure, just know that not only can Orchestrator leverage the Veeam Software Appliance for your backups, but then also on top of that, it got some additional facelifts as well, plus a new audit report that I'm sure a lot of you, when we're thinking about compliance and how do we make sure that we're not missing anything or any changes that have been made inside of our infrastructure, how do we continue to report on that? You'll also see that added as a new report as well. So really excited to see what the whole Veeam Data Platform has brought with this latest release.
So as you can see, the Veeam of today is so much more. We encourage you to go to veeam.com. There you can download a trial. You can get more information on our products. You can go to our community. It all starts at veeam.com. Thanks for watching this breakout.